This is episode 387 of jumbleThink.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to jumbleThink, where we interview dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers all about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's show is Tom Bancroft. More about Tom in a moment. Whether you're a new listener or a longtime fan, if you've never subscribed to jumbleThink, now's the time to do it. Head on over to jumblethinc.com, where you'll find links to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and more. And you can subscribe to the show. And of course, we're at all of your favorite places for podcasts, so simply search for the jumbleThink podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Now let's join today's conversation. Hey there, friends. Welcome to jumbleThink. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have an incredible show lined up for you today, but before we dive into that, I know for many of you, this might be the first time in a while that you've heard my voice. It's been a crazy year. I've been out working on wildfires in California, Washington, Montana, and Arizona. We've been on an epic road trip as a family. It has been crazy. And we're going to update you as a family on some of those things in the weeks to come. But beyond that, it has been a season of preparing for the next season of jumbleThink, including bringing you the world of jumbleThink via video on Facebook and YouTube and much more. Now, our guest today kicks off a great series of upcoming episodes with Broadway stars, business leaders, and much more. You're not going to want to miss those episodes. And to kick it off, we have an incredible guest. His name is Tom Bancroft. He is a former Disney animator. He has created characters of some of the most popular and profitable animated features of all time, including The Lion King, Pocahontas, and Mulan. He has also directed 10 feature films and 8 TV series. We're going to talk about his world inside of Disney, his world after Disney, and we're also going to be talking about this new adventure that you can join and be a part of called Pencilish. Pencilish is this new animation studio doing cool things. Like I mentioned, you can actually join the team by being an investor. I am an investor. This interview is not sponsored by any way by Pencilish, but you can actually be an owner of a ground-up animation studio with some incredible leaders that are creating that. So I could tell you more about Tom. I could be telling you more about Pencilish, but instead, we're going to join the conversation with Tom, and you can hear from his own mouth, his story, and how he got into animation, the adventures at Disney, and now the adventure he is creating at Pencilish. Let's go ahead and join today's conversation with Tom Bancroft. I'm so excited about today's guest. Tom, welcome to jumbleThink.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's so nice to meet you too, Michael.
Well, it's awesome to have a professional podcaster like you. Well, you have a podcast, but what you're known for, though, of course, is animation in the world of character creation. And it's really fascinating. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about this really cool thing you're launching called Pencilish on WeFunder, which, and full disclosure, I am an investor. I think this is really a cool idea.
Oh, man, I'd love to hear that. We should talk more about your investment. No, but I love that you have. It's funny. I just did a podcast, another podcast, and Jordan Rayner, and he said he invested too. And I was like, oh, wow, this is, I didn't expect it. So it's just a nice treat every time I hear that.
I see a marketing play here. Every podcast you go on, they have to invest.
Oh, yeah. It's like a guilt invest or something like that. I don't know. Or hopefully they just researched me and find out about it and want to. I don't know. Either way, I'm happy.
Right from up front, if you're listening or tuning in any way here, we will have these links in episode notes. So you don't even have to work for it. If you want to invest, as we talk about Pencilish, while you're listening, you can click on the link there. If you want to check out what they're doing and learn more about Tom, we'll have links there to his website and to the podcast too. So we make it easy. You don't have to work for it. Go check it out while you're listening to the conversation today and learn more as you listen more. Before we get into Pencilish, I want to step back and build a foundation of kind of who you are, because unlike TV, and in some ways like TV and film, you are an unseen player in what you're creating. And there are a lot of unseen players, directors, filmographers, lighting, tech, audio people who are in the TV and film side, but you define a lot of the visuals without actually being seen yourself. So give us the foundation of who you are and your background.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny because when I was at Disney, we had this sort of phrase that for animators is that we were actors with a pencil, and so we're like the behind the scenes. We're hiding behind our pencil, basically, making films like The Lion King and Aladdin and Pocahontas. And so I worked on Beauty and the Beast also, and Mulan and Tarzan. So those were some of the films I worked on when I was at Disney for about 12 years, and Brother Bear and a few others too. Um, and in the case of, and we are cast. So as an animator, I was animating only young Simba primarily in The Lion King, and then Pocahontas, and later on Mushu the dragon. I was the supervising animator of him, so I got to design him for about 6 months, and then go into production and actually animate him, and work with a team of other animators too that animated Mushu also. And so, you really get focused into that character. So we need to not only be able to, and this is more in the 2D hand-drawn days. This doesn't exist quite the same way with computer animation, but in those days, the idea was that you were cast on that character, so you not only knew how to draw them from every angle and different expressions and all that you would need, but also how they would act. I need to know if Mushu's faced with this situation, how would he react? And not just. Now, I also have the other guide, which is the voice acting. Eddie Murphy, in that case, had already recorded his lines, and so I have all these sort of tools in front of me. I listen to his line over and over again. Okay, I can hear this inflection, and is there things in there that I can kind of draw upon to create a performance that kind of takes it past just the storyboards? And that's kind of what the job was. And yeah, you're right. It's very behind the scenes.
Yeah. And for those who are interested in the voice acting side of things, we sat down with Rob Paulson over 2 episodes and Jim Cummings to talk about the process, which shocked me that the voice acting comes before the animation when it comes to the actual final product. I never realized that until talking to them. The whole process of animation, the whole process of it is probably the most collaborative type of entertainment, it seems like, when it comes to there isn't one person that just brings that character to life. It is a truly team effort.
Oh, it totally is. Even like from where I'm sitting in the animator's desk back at Disney, I had already influences of some character designs from another character designer potentially that made some model sheets, like say on Young Simba, and I'm looking at those. I have the storyboards access to, so I already know what some storyboard artist has drawn for that scene, even like an expression or something like that were in the storyboards as Simba saying this line. He has this worried look or whatever. So I have that influence. Obviously, I have, in that case, Jonathan Taylor Thomas's dialogue of him saying those lines and hearing his inflections, and then it's just up to me to then kind of take all of that and kind of sit with the scene for a moment and think about, okay, how would I perform this? How would I act this out? And we literally did. We had a mirror in front of us, or we could videotape ourselves. But in general, it's just you and the paper at that point trying to figure out, even down to like, when should the character blink? Is he blinking as he's turning to look at Pumbaa and saying Hakuna Matata, or whatever that line is, where he's trying to figure out what that phrase means. Things like that. You just, it's so minute, the details that go into it. People don't really think about it. And if you do your job right, people don't think about it. That's really the goal, is to have all those things kind of fit together and just become a performance where all you know is that little lion cub is in trouble, and he feels guilty because he thinks he killed his dad, and now he's got to go do this, or he just met these 2 little bachelors, Timon and Pumbaa. So that's the goal, is to make it all feel just like a story. You're not thinking about that there was all these levels and things that went together to make that.
What fascinates me even deeper on that, if we pull it back a little bit more, is that not only do you have to have the skill of the artist, but you have to be a master of observation to understand inflection and of response or how something moves. And I know that in the case of like Lion King, they did a whole bunch of studies in Africa with video and
Yeah.
everything like that. And so as an animator, as an illustrator, as a character developer in this process,
Mm-hmm.
how do you get the inspiration to really capture character? And I know you have two really cool books about this. You have a book called Creating Characters with Personality and Character Mentor that
Yeah.
you've written about this. But for you personally, when you're going into a character development, or when you're going in and taking somebody else's character and bringing them to life through, frame after frame of illustration, how are you getting inspired by that observation to really bring that to life?
You do become sort of an acting geek.
Mm.
And any Pixar or Disney animator in the past or even today, they're acting geeks. They watch a lot of movies and they watch actors performing. And and we actually did have acting classes. They would bring in improv teachers and things like that. Even though we as animators, we're like the worst actors. Like we're very, reclusive and don't want to have anybody look at us. We can tend to be that kind of person. I'm a little bit less so than some, but in general, that's why we're trying to create a performance through, in this case, the paper or the screen or whatever. And so we have to understand that. We have to kind of know the art of acting and performance. And really the art of acting is they'll say reacting, right? Is always, how does someone react to whatever things are being kind of forced upon them, either dialogue wise or situationally. And making that look as casual as possible, right? Acting should be invisible, right? You shouldn't be able to tell somebody's acting. They're just becoming that person in that moment. And so that's the same with animation. And as weird as that sounds when nobody thinks about it, but these cartoon characters are just kind of coming to life, and we got to be able to do that. And now there's a technical side to that too, which nobody wants to hear about, but of all the concepts of squash and stretch and these like 12 principles of animation of how you make something move and come to life. There's timing and there's just so many layers to it. But I won't go into that. I'm not going to teach you how to animate, right? But it is all that's involved too, and you kind of have to put some of that in the back of your head. That's really why I think it takes. And Walt Disney actually said that it takes 10 years to make a good animator, because you have to get to the point where you've mastered it enough that you can put a lot of it in the back of your head and not have it overwhelm you, and just think about performance and then draftsmanship and then timing and all those other things that are involved in creating a graceful movement.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother part, right? That part of it becomes a little bit more in the back of your head. And if it's too far in the front, it gets to be a very stiff and technical performance, and it doesn't feel natural, right? So yeah, I'm only talking about the animation part of it. Before that, there's the step of character design. That's what my books are about, creating characters with personality and character mentor, where I'm talking about even just in the design of the character, the shapes you choose, even, rounder shapes feel more like, warmer characters and bouncy or bubbly characters. That's why babies are very round, right? Santa Claus is very round.
Very round.
They're jolly and jovial and bouncy, and it tends to go that direction. While an angular character, think of a Jafar, right, in Aladdin, that design principle that's being applied there is that he's angular and triangular. He's a lot of triangles within his design, even though you can't really see them. You don't think about it, but you can feel it. And there's a lot sharper angles to a Jafar character too. So there's a lot of like subtle things and things like that all add up to that performance, from the design all the way to the acting and animation and voice casting.
You were at Disney in a very unique time in their history, especially around the world of animation. There's been a series of documentaries coming out lately, both from the Disney point of view and outside of Disney, previous animators, previous staff. And there was like this tension between, what was it, Katzenberg and Eisner, and all of that. And yet animation was almost dead at Disney when these movies that you're talking about came to light, when you guys reinvented that. So it was a very unique time to be a part of that ethos. I'm an outsider looking in, you're an insider in there. What was it like to say, let's give one last go and try to make this something that Disney brings back to the forefront? What was it like to be a part of that culture, to be a part of what was happening, which was very special, but also very turbulent?
Yeah, during the 90s and 2000s, that was the second golden age, and we didn't know it at the time. That's the kind of term you discover, or somebody gives it that label after the fact, right?
Yeah.
In looking back in hindsight, at the time, it was just exciting to be there. I happened to land at Disney coming out of CalArts. That was the school I went to, and I was only about 21 years old when I got my first job at Disney, and they were making The Little Mermaid as I was an intern. So that I was still an intern. And who knew? I mean, I saw the pencil test. I saw the original version of The Little Mermaid because it was still being animated at the time. And so I would hear the songs and I'd see it just as storyboards and things like that. But even then I knew, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. I was falling in love with the songs, and I had never been interested in that before, but I was like falling in love with Ariel through these songs she's singing about wanting to be somewhere else, right?
Wow.
Dreaming of being a part of another world, right? And falling in love with this guy, who fortunately turns out to be a good guy, because she's just basically very superficially in love with him at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
She just sees him and falls in love, but doesn't usually work out that well. But anyway, being there on the cusp of that, and really it happened even when I was during my freshman year, like the summer before my freshman year, which was 1987, I think it was, Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out, and that really started bubbling up. But really, the industry was at an all-time low, and like you were saying, they were thinking about shutting the doors of Disney, and it wasn't. And then Michael Eisner came in and reinvigorated it, along with Jeffrey Katzenberg, who Michael brought in to be the head of the animation and I think live action studios too. They did kind of bring it all back, and so they brought in musicals and kind of not that musicals were new to Disney, but they made it more like a Broadway thing. There was a lot of theater people that came into Disney at that time. Jeffrey Katzenberg and had that background. Peter Schneider, who's the head of animation, had a theater background. And so they would bring in people like Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, who ended up writing a lot of the songs and things for Little Mermaid. And it was just this amazing alchemy that came out of it. Then on top of that, we had this second generation of animators like me who were just geeks about it, and we wanted to do what the old guys had done with Lady and the Tramp and Cinderella, and we wanted to have our version of that. And there were enough of us somehow that it was this magic time to sort of make all those things, and everything kind of just lined up. And so we made hit after hit after hit, and those films are still around. I cannot believe it. I'm 53 and I'm still talking about Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast or especially Mulan, because we just, we were just trying to do the best we could, and we loved it. So whenever you get a lot of creative people together that really love what they do and are passionate about it, and then are hopefully being ushered by production people that also care, but also know, well, it's still got to get done. I do believe that at the time I didn't like those people, but I get it now. Being on the other side, I'm a business owner, and I go, okay, yeah, that was some of the magic too. I got to give that credit too, is that we were being kind of pushed along, to to create things, but also get them done.
Now, there are so many
That's
different
important.
questions we could cover in today's conversation. You are also unique because you have a twin brother who also worked in Disney animation. That must have been an interesting dynamic because he was one of the directors of Mulan, and you're working for him and your twin brothers. And how did you both end up at Disney?
Yeah, if he's listening to this, you just made his day. So he still loves to talk about how he was my boss on Mulan, and I'll never ever hear the end of that. But yeah, and the nice side is that Mulan has kind of become our family movie. As with our kids, all the cousins, my kids and his kids, and because he co-directed it, and I was the supervising animator, Mushu, and we both had really fun, important parts of that film. And we were very entrenched in it, probably longer, both of us, longer than you would normally be on a film if you were just an animator. Like as a supervising animator, I came on earlier. I was there a good year before I even started animating test scenes and stuff. And I think I even predate Tony. I got on the film before he did. And so, but both of us were there for, it was a good 2.5, years of being on the production. And so, we had a lot of say and things like that. We were in a lot of the same meetings. And so, yeah, it was very interesting time to be, and we had kind of a bro code, which was, we knew, and we had to develop it pretty early on. It was new to our relationship, but to say, okay, there's times where I'm just going to look at you as director, Tony, and there's going to be times where you're going to still be Tony, my younger brother. And so we're 3 minutes apart, but still. And so we would have lunches where we'd go and I would just be sworn to secrecy. I had to let him vent and be a brother.
Yeah.
But talk about his job, and like, oh man, this was rough and this guy's treating me bad or whatever. Kind of complain a little bit about his job, but not. And I had to separate myself and say, no, I'm just a brother now. I'm not going to. And likewise, I couldn't go to him and just complain about my job because I also knew he couldn't separate himself that much. I could more, but as a director, I needed to be careful about how I complain about the job too.
Yeah.
And in people that he's closely, involved with. And so, it was just this, we had to be careful. And I think that it was a real growth time for our relationship as brothers and as twins, for sure, that we'll never forget. And also, it made us closer during that time too.
I have two daughters, one that's 8, one that is 4. We just watched the live action one. They've also watched the cartoon one several times. Our oldest daughter has Mushu in Lego form on her bookshelf right now. We built it together, her and I. It was cool. A very fun moment to watch the movies with them and then also to work on that project. Yeah, it is just really fun to see how they've loved these movies too that you've worked on, that I grew up watching, and then now they're also loving it.
I mean, that's good parenting if you're passing down the classics. Okay. I just want to compliment you there. You're raising them right, showing them the original Mulan, not just the new one. Okay.
Yeah. We're going to take a break right here, and in a few moments, we'll be back to continue the conversation with today's guest, Tom Bancroft. For the last year, I've been working on a really cool project called Podcast Magazine. I get to write about some of the greatest podcasts around the world of TV and film, acting, and pop culture. It's really fun to be a part of it. And because you're listening to jumbleThink, my guess is that you like podcasts. And if you do, I want to invite you to check out Podcast Magazine. Typically, there is a subscription to Podcast Magazine, whether it's digital or in print. You have to pay a fee. But because you are a listener of jumbleThink, I want to extend a special offer for you. If you head on over to podcastmagazine.com/free, you can subscribe to the Podcast Magazine completely for free. And best of all, it is a lifetime subscription. Now, if you go on to Podcast Magazine and check out the subscribe button, you'll notice that the digital version and the print magazine are a subscription that costs money. but I wanted to extend that little offer for you so that you could go check out the magazine and get that lifetime subscription for free. So head on over podcastmagazine.com/free and learn more about the world of podcasting. Now let's jump back into today's conversation. After Disney, you moved on to Big Idea Productions, VeggieTales. Why did you leave Disney and head on over there? What happened to make that shift for you?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll try and give the short version. And I'm a Christian, so I had a faith journey that was kind of in the middle of my career, and it was right at a point. And I thought it was, when you're younger, you think, oh, I'm halfway through my career. I wasn't at all. I was more at the beginning, but I'd been at Disney for about at least 10 years at that point. And I heard about this company, Big Idea. I had a major sort of change in my life, which was I was already a believer, and I'd known a little bit about VeggieTales, but basically the long story short is I got sick. I had been saying yes to every single project Disney threw at me because I wanted to climb the ladder. I wanted to get to the point that I finally was at around the time I was animating Mushu. And just after Mulan, I took on so much, not only from Mulan, but then worked on Tarzan at night, but worked on the short John Henry during the day, and basically just was saying yes to everything. And because it was good opportunities. And what ended up happening is I got meningitis. I ended up basically being in the hospital for a week, and they didn't know what it was. And it was, swelling. That's what meningitis is. Your brain is swelling from an infection. And so I could have died, and not only, pretty much literally. And so that I came out of the hospital and I looked at Disney differently. I didn't, and mostly my career, I should say, I still love Disney. I still loved animation. I still do today. But I started going, wait, I'm not giving my all to my family. I'm not giving my all to my God. I'm sort of been so focused on me and my career. And so long story short, fairly miraculously, and I won't go into everything, but I find out about Big Idea and that they're hiring and that they're gearing up to do their first feature film. And I end up contacting, and for whatever reason, and this is a God moment for me, I get obsessed with it. I'm at Disney, the pinnacle of animation, and at the pinnacle of timing too. Like, they are in their second golden age, fairly rooted, and I've kind of risen to a top position there finally after years of trying to get there. And all I care about is this little company in Chicago making these VeggieTale films, and I'm going around to my other animators and telling them about it. And they're all like, why do you care? And I don't even understand it. And so long story short, I end up going to Big Idea and working with them for about 2.5 years and creating the LarryBoy 2D animated series for them and with them, and working on the first feature film, Jonah.
Yep.
And then they go bankrupt, and I get laid off within 2.5 years. And so it was in that moment, it was one of those sort of trying times where you go, but God, why? What? I just gave up all this and came here for a short amount of time. Felt like I was just starting to do some good, and now I'm laid off, and I go back to Disney. I worked on Brother Bear because it was, they needed help. And so it was
and you needed a job.
And I needed a job. It was low hanging fruit. But, I remember thinking at that time, and my wife and I both being kind of upset at God, being a little bitter about like, whoa, wait, we did all this. We did our part, we thought. But I must admit, looking back, and I know I don't think this is normally a spiritual podcast. I don't know. But I'm going there a little bit, is looking back a few years later. And we don't always get this, to be honest, Michael. We don't get to know what it was all about, right? In this world, I think in heaven, you get some answers probably. Yeah. But in our case, we kind of saw it a few years later when we moved to Franklin, where we live now, Franklin, Tennessee. Yeah. Big Idea moved within, and I started my own company, but within like 3 months of us coming here, they moved to Franklin, Tennessee, literally a mile from my house. They became one of my biggest clients. I wasn't no longer an employee of Big Idea, but they used me and my partner our company as their main outsource, where we storyboarded on their second feature film and all that, not as Big Idea employees, but as an outsourced company.
Hmm.
And it really supported us and it helped set up our whole company. And so those relationships and things that I didn't know why I made them and all that, and even some of the things. And then the other hard part of it is that for years now, I have people like you still asking me about Big Idea Days because
Yeah.
they were touched by those videos. And believe me when I tell you, that is the bigger answer to all those questions of why did that all happen? Well, we did make some things that made a difference and touched people. And I don't know if one more feature film at Disney would have done that,
Yeah.
in the same way.
Yeah. Now, I will say this. We do have lots of faith conversations on the show. I used to be a
Oh, okay.
pastor
Oh,
for
okay.
years in Northern California until the '08 recession happened. And I ended up in the world of technology, working on a lot of projects in Silicon Valley. And because they
Wow.
couldn't afford to pay me at the church. And so I
Yeah.
get that journey. I can really sympathize with
Oh, good.
like, okay, well, that's what my career was. And that was the choice that, what do I do now? And so the journey of faith is so powerful.
Oh, it is. And and I don't ever want to take faith out of my telling of my story either. So, because it
Yeah.
is such and especially that element. Why did
Yeah.
you go to Big Idea? Why did you leave Disney? Those two questions are interrelated and it's all a faith journey. So I can't tell that story without including it. And I don't want to.
Yeah.
So and I never want to forget it. And even though there was like a moment where there was like a bitter twist to that story of like, why, why God, why would this happen? And all these people were laid off and they were wonderful people and good friends. Um, and was this all for nothing kind of a thing?
Yeah.
But seeing, later on, I'm still working with some of those people from Big
Yeah.
Idea. I'm
Yeah.
literally teaching now at Lipscomb University, and one of my co-teachers and best friends is Mike Naraki, the voice of Larry.
Yeah.
He now lives here and he's an instructor with me at Lipscomb and part of the animation program that I helped develop. He's teaching some of the classes. It's just amazing to me to see his hand in my life, even though in some cases I was running from him, I must admit, and other times I was running toward him, but in confusion and
Yeah.
not knowing why. It's not a straight line. Our lives are not a straight line. Our careers are not a straight line. And we just make all these plans and, it's that old saying, but God laughs,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that messy journey of faith that really refines us into God's created purpose for us, who he's called us to be. And without the messiness, often we miss it, I think.
Yeah. And I think I'll just dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
I think because you just said that, we miss it. And I think I've always tried to stay in tune with this, and I forget it all the time because I'm just horrible. Just a horrible person. But I'm a sinner, right? And
Yeah.
I wish we would bring that word back into our vocabulary, sin. It's so into the church even. I must
Yeah.
admit, how many
Yeah.
churches don't talk about sin anymore? Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation, a sort of a pet peeve, because it still exists and it's
Yeah.
still why we screw up and
Yeah.
why we do the things we do. But yeah, so what we oftentimes do is that we say a prayer and we don't look for the answer sometimes. And to me, we call it a coincidence sometimes.
Yeah.
Years ago, I just decided, somebody said something to me and it really resonated in my life, which was that how can you be a Christian and believe in coincidence, right?
Yeah.
And so I've since then tried to take coincidence out of my even thought process. And when you do that, you start seeing God's hand in your life, because a lot of times we just equate something to like, oh, how amazing that happened, right when I needed it. Okay, great. And we just continue on and we kind of take credit for it, really. And it was a good thing I was there when that happened, because otherwise, I would have missed out on that opportunity. Oh, wait, that was something I was praying about. Wait a second. So take coincidence out, and all of a sudden it's a blessing.
Yeah.
It's an answered prayer, right? Those two concepts go away when you consider, when you have coincidence in your life.
Yeah.
And I see Christians all the time, like, knock on wood. And I'm like, wait, what are we doing when we're doing that? It's
Superstition.
another thing where you're attributing. It is. I mean, but it's beyond that. You're attributing something that hopefully won't happen, by knocking on wood, to somebody else or some other thing than God.
Yeah.
And so I really try and be conscious of that. And it really does kind of change the way you look. And it basically just gives it back to God. It makes me go, thank you, God. I have to remember that was from you. That was an answered prayer, and say thank you.
Yeah. It reminds me of the text in Psalm 27, I think it's verse 13. I would have despaired unless I believed I would see the goodness of God in the land of the living. And I think that that's just such a powerful illustration that God is significantly moving in our lives around us. And often we miss it because we're attributing it to something else, or we're looking for some other result, or we have a different expectation. And yet those journeys lead us to, like in the case of your journey, lead you to where you are today and the things you're doing today, which probably would have never happened if you stayed at Disney, or if you would have been at Big Idea and things wouldn't have fallen apart. You wouldn't be where you are today if those things wouldn't have changed the course of where you were going.
Oh yeah. I feel like I'm hardly involved in my life sometimes when I look back and I just go, wow. And I don't want to make it sound like we're puppets. I'm not saying that. But I just go, wow, I thought of this, and this. This was my line, and this was the direction I was heading. And God, join me. I'm going that direction. And it's just laughable when you look back and you just go, well, those things didn't work out at all. And for a while, I didn't get it. And I was just I felt like I was floundering, even though I was praying about things and trying to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But really, he was just leading me in a different direction. It was even better. And it wasn't floundering. I was actually just on the wrong path. And now I needed to be kind of brought over here.
Yeah.
And, so much of it, I'm just constantly patting myself on the back and going, but then realizing later, no, that wasn't me. Why am I patting myself on the back all the time? It's just pride,
And we're going to take a break right here. And when we come back, we're going to continue the conversation with Tom. And we're going to be talking about this really cool startup that he's doing called Pencilish, and why they're doing it, what they're doing, and how you can become a part of it. We'll be right back. Here at jumbleThink, we believe you matter, that your dreams and ideas matter, that you were created for amazing things. We want to hear what your dreams are and how you're creating them. Head on over to jumbleThink.com/Facebook. That's jumbleThink.com/Facebook. And in the post that says "My Dream Is," in the comments, put what your dream is and what you're doing to make it a reality. Together, we can make our dreams and ideas become true, become part of our everyday lives. So head on over jumbleThink.com/Facebook, drop your dream, your idea into the comments, and let's support each other on the journey of making our dreams and ideas a reality. Now let's continue today's conversation with Tom Bancroft. We are back with Tom Bancroft. I'm excited about this new thing that you're working on called Pencilish. I found it, I want to say, a publicist sent it over to me, and I clicked on the link to WeFunder, checked it out, and I showed my wife, and I said, we've got to be a part of this, even if it's just a small amount that we can give to be a part of it, because this is just really, really cool. And so I'm excited to be a part of it, even though it's at a small scale, to be able to give and help support what you're doing. Tell us about what the origin of Pencilish was, what the vision is, and why you think this company is so important right now.
Well, first of all, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. To me, that support. And the nice thing I want to tell people is that this is different than anything that hopefully you've heard about with crowdfunding, right? This is crowd investing. And I try to make sure I say that right. There's oftentimes I slip up and say crowdfunding, and they are generally crowd investing is within that umbrella of crowdfunding, But what's a bit different is this is not a donation, is that you are investing into a company. So we are a startup company, Pencilish Animation Studios. We're the very first animation, crowd invested animation company. And what we really are is right now, a small entertainment company. And we're gonna create entertainment that is animation to begin with. And we hopefully will get into live action and everything else down the road. But animation is our wheelhouse, and 2D animation especially is where we're starting, because that's also our wheelhouse. And we're going to create new content that we own the IP, the intellectual property, and that is really kind of gold. Like if you've ever seen Shark Tank, right? And I love Shark Tank. I have a feeling you do too.
Yep.
With your background. What I always learn from it is that all the investor guys and gals, as soon as they say that line where and we own the patent for this concept or whatever it is, they always light up, right?
Yeah.
They're always like, okay, oh, you got a patent. Let's talk a little bit more about that. And we have multiple patents. That's where, because that's ownership of something that is valuable, right?
Yeah.
And nobody else has that patent, right? That's what intellectual property is in the film and animation world, right? Is you own the intellectual property of that concept and those characters, right? And so what I've been going through 30 years of my career and not owning intellectual properties. I've been creating intellectual properties, but I'm always doing it for another company. And in a small way, at least, I'm still buying Mushu plush toys, right? Because if I see a new one out, I created that character. That's my design, oftentimes based on my drawings. And yeah, I want that T-shirt, or I want that thing, and everything because I'm proud of it, right? And just wow, it's still around, right? I love that, but I have to buy it. Nobody's giving it to me. Nobody, you know what I mean? And certainly not seeing any royalties from it, because I signed those agreements and those contracts years and years ago that anything I did at Disney, they own, right?
Yeah.
And I made that agreement. I'm not bitter, right?
Yeah.
I get it. I made that agreement. I believe strongly that I'm not going to contest it. I was well paid during those years to do that work, and it's blessed me too, right? I've seen, I still talk about it, and it gets me jobs and things like that. So I'm not going to go that direction of like fighting that, of course. But what it did make me go is, okay, there's a certain point where you start going, but I have a lot of ideas for TV shows and feature films, and why aren't I developing those, and why aren't I owning those IPs and not selling it right away, right? And so I thought when somebody approached me, my partner, who's a marketing guy too, which is another great part of what we have at Pencilish, is we have a marketing arm and involvement.
Ash Grayson?
Ash Grayson.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's the one that approached me and said, there's this thing called the Reg CF. It's a regulation crowdfunding thing. And it popped up about 6 years ago. It's starting to become popular right when we were talking about this, actually during COVID. This is when we first started talking about creating Pencilish. And so from the ashes comes Pencilish Animation. But when he kind of told me about it, and I had known about it a little bit, I've been actually, and this is another God thing, where I had already heard about, like, Legion M was a film studio that was created a couple years ago through one of the first Reg CF raises. And it's a way for people to create a startup company. And for the first time ever, investors can put in as little as $100 and be involved in a startup. Yeah. Now, obviously, these are high risk companies. Any startup is a high risk company, right? Yeah. And it's long-term investment too. You're not going to get a quick return. Yeah. We are always strongly, telling people that. But the other side of that is that obviously that's where you could potentially see the biggest gains, is to be in on the beginning and put in very little money, and that money could actually grow into something big. That can't happen unless you're in at the beginning, right? We all know that. You don't have to be a major investor to understand that concept. And we've heard that over and over again, how that person was in on Apple, very early. But the part that we don't know, the average investor doesn't know, is you don't have that opportunity with a lot of these major companies. One, they're already well past startup. You can't do that with Disney, obviously. But even like a tech company or whatever in the, say, 90s and the 2000s, the people that were really making the money were the VCs, the early investors, but to be that person, you had to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like
Yeah.
there was minimums that were legally, you couldn't invest 100, 500, 10,000 even dollars. And so now you can. And that's what's exciting about what's going on right now. There's many companies that are having the opportunity to create new content and things like that. Well, we're doing content, but they're creating products. And so I feel like we're at the perfect time, and have kind of aligned with also the needs. There's been ever a time where there's been a bigger need for IP, for intellectual property and content for the streamers that are huge now.
If you're listening right now and you want to learn more about this space, I recommend checking out our interview with Kendrick Gwynn. He is the founder of Republic, which is one of the leading companies. He was also one of the chief legal counsels for Angel List for a long time, helping what you were talking about. Their accredited investors, which are those people that 100,000, I think, and more could invest, which are, there's all kinds of stipulations on how much money you have to have in the bank and how much you can invest and a percentage of equity that you, all kinds of things. And I love that, what started with Kickstarter and GoFundMe and organizations like that has now opened the door to these equitable investments, not just, hey, you're going to get a cool book or something back, which the cool book's still good. I invest in those kind of things too. But I love that, what you're doing here is open to the average Joe. The other thing that you mentioned there real quickly, and I think that a lot of people probably missed, and I want to highlight this, is that for Disney or Pixar, which is Disney, or Warner Brothers Animation or DreamWorks, a lot of the money isn't just in the movie. The movie generates money, it does well, but a lot of it is in the merchandise. That's where the billions of dollars is made versus the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so you're not only just looking at this as a play of creating content, but you're looking at this as how we use the intellectual property to create those assets that go beyond, we invested $14 million. We have a return of $120 million from box office sales and DVD and VHS is gone. So is DVD. It's from streaming revenue. You are saying we see this as the bigger stack of, we create the content, we create the characters, which comes before the content, and then we create the IP that can then be reused to generate additional revenue. Is that right?
Exactly. And yeah, that is the heart of why it's important to own the IP, right? Is that now you have the keys to do all the merchandising and the licensing and all that really is the money. A lot of people don't know this, but with film in general, but animation especially, that it's so expensive to create animated shows and series and feature films that really making the actual product, the film or the TV show, is pretty much a break even. Like you're kind of lucky to break even at that point. The money really is in the merchandising and the licensing deals that come after it once it becomes popular. And so that's what's also groundbreaking and kind of revolutionary of what we're doing with Pencilish is not just the crowdfunding, where the actual source of money that's coming to help us create this, but which is still cool, is that we're going to be a company that we're creating IP. A lot of people will create an animation studio and then they just work for Disney and they help them create Tangled TV series or whatever, right? We could be a work for hire company and we could give a return on investment because we would make enough and if we just stayed busy all the time, we could turn a profit and because that's the idea, right? To keep that studio afloat, you have to turn a profit and we could return on investment, but it would be, a trickle of money, really. It would be, it's a stay afloat kind of a system, right? Really to build a company to actually kind of year after year make more money, which is what companies strive to do.
Yeah.
And it took me 30 years to understand is that you have to own some ownership of something that is popular in the culture, right? And so that's what Pencilish is doing, is we're a little small studio, at least right now, doing what the big boys are doing, right? And so and then on top of that, you can get in on the beginning of it and own a piece of it. So that's exactly what Pencilish Animation Studios is.
Now, I know that as of earlier today, over 1.2 million raised in investment so far
Yeah.
through WeFunder. You have some other revenue that's been invested by other partners and players and yourself.
Yes. Uh-huh.
You are still open for funding at wefunder.com/pencilish, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the quicker place is we have pencilish.com. If you just
Mhm.
want to go right to pencilish.com, there's a button to go to the WeFunder, so that's even faster.
Yeah, and we'll put those links in the episode notes. How much longer are you guys going to be open for allowing investments into Pencilish?
Yeah, so you have about a year from when you start. So we started, and I should know the exact date, but when we get closer, we'll definitely be telling people. But it's around December. So I remember we started. We just launched in December because I remember on Christmas Day we got our first 100,000. I remember that
Wow.
pretty profoundly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, that's the business side of things. That's the how you're generating revenue through animation and partnership.
Mhm.
What are some of the well, I don't know if you can share the IPs yet, but what are some of what is the vision for the content you want to create?
Well, we're secular. I know we've been talking about faith a lot in this conversation, but we are creating secular content. So I don't want people to kind of get confused by my past and all that and think, oh, we're going to be making Christian content. We're not against it. It's not like we wouldn't necessarily go that direction if it felt like it was going to be a viable thing and bring a return on investment, of course, too, for our investors. So we're conscious of that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to launch on YouTube. So our year one uh, goal is to create 3 different series, and we already have those 3. We're locking down one of them with a creator right now legally. So I haven't really announced it. Actually, hopefully later today, I'm going to announce our first project because we do have that one locked down. And then one of them is one of my own, so we could start announcing that pretty soon too. We're just in development on those 3 projects right now, and but the goal will be that we'll create short form animated series. So these will be about 3 to 5 minute long episodes, and then we'll make about 5 initially 5 episodes of each of the 3 series.
Mm,
So at launch, we may launch with only the first 3 of each thing to get people interested, but we want to have those 3 different shows rather than just make one thing and go in with, and they're short on top of that and you digest it in about 5 minutes. We want to come out with, okay, this is what we're doing. We want to have a strong entrance, even though they are short form. So again, quicker return on investment, but also less spend on the upfront to get ideas and the characters and get people to fall in love with them. And so where do you do that? YouTube.
yeah.
Well, I decided very early on, I'm not going to create a website that called Pencilish, and you're going to go there to see all of our content. That we would spend $1 million on that, right? You could easily spend at least $500,000 on just doing that. And so I'd rather put that money into creating the content and getting a lot of eyes on it. And we're going to put marketing money. That's where Ash Grayson comes in. We're gonna have people see it, because also that's something else that people don't do on YouTube. People create content, put a ton of time into it, and just put it on YouTube and just pray it goes viral, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not gonna do that. We're gonna make sure people see it.
Yeah.
We're gonna put some marketing dollars. By the way, that's learn that at Disney, right? They are masters at marketing, and
Yeah.
we should never frown upon that. It's up to people to like the content. We just
Yeah.
want to make sure they see it. We don't
Yeah.
want them to know about it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's another key element of our Pencilish, is to save money to make sure that we have some funds that's set aside for marketing.
Yeah. Awareness.
Yeah.
And in the world of podcast, I think other than the big, probably 25 podcasts, Joe Rogan, uh, um, Malcolm Gladwell, some of the big players, awareness is always the conversation that pops up when I'm talking to other podcasts. How do I get more awareness? Because
Yeah.
then a person can make a decision on if they like the content or not. I'm going to make a prediction here that hopefully 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, this plays out. And that is, um, with what I'm seeing in media, and as a tech person who's worked in Silicon Valley, and as a person talking to a lot of people, I think we're going to see all the streaming medias and a lot of the traditional distribution points, whether it's a Discovery Channel product, whether it's a Disney, we're going to see more and more of that put directly on YouTube instead of going through a streaming service. And I think they'll figure out revenue streams to make that work. I think that the saturation point for a whole owned streaming services is just going to be at a point where it's not sustainable. And so it's going to be getting eyeballs on content and doing what you're doing with using licensing and IP to generate the revenue and bringing awareness through the content creation. And we're already seeing it with History Channel. They're putting a lot of their shows directly right on YouTube. And so I'm going to make that prediction. We're going to see a collapse of the streaming services, and they're going to go to one centralized hub. So
that's
wrong.
bold. I like that. I kind of like that. It's interesting because what we're seeing with entertainment, this is a bigger, topic, is a little bit, we're scaling things down, and it's what we've already seen happen in the music industry, right? Because the days of making millions upon millions of dollars, basically almost becoming a billionaire rock star. I don't know if we have billionaire rock stars, but we probably do. The older ones that have been around for, the Beatles,
the Paul McCartney's, the Bonos, the
there are those, right?
Yeah.
I think that's going away. And we already seen that in the music industry, where we have smaller artists that can communicate to their niche audience. And so they have to do things leaner, right? They're not going to go, and the touring, right, isn't as the actual making the actual song and putting out an album, which is what got them rich. And then they would go on tour just to kind of make that album sell. That switched. So now we got to put out songs so that we can go on tour, because the tour actually makes the money, right? It's really switched in the music industry. That's what's happening. That's exactly what you just said, is going to the theater experience and paying top dollar at a movie theater to watch a movie has become, now I'm watching it with my family and we're streaming it. And those people didn't make quite as much money off of us. We paid whatever, even up to $20 for like a premiere, what they call the Disney premiere things. But my whole family sat and watched it, rather than me paying, whatever, almost $10 a head for my whole family, and pay $50, whatever. So they're losing money, but they're going direct. They didn't have to put as much money out in some ways, because the prints and all the publicity that goes along to getting your movie into the theater is very, very expensive. You almost spend twice as much just to get it into the movie theater as what you put into the actual producing the film. So now YouTube will be a step down from that, so budgets will get smaller. And by the way, that's part of our plan. Our budgets are very lean. Hopefully what will come out of it that's still going to be good is quality storytelling and really fun characters that you still fall in love with. That doesn't have to go away. I grew up in the 70s and 80s watching cartoons. It was Super Friends and things like that. And really that model of how inexpensive they made Super Friends, and I'm not saying maybe we'll go down to this level, so I don't want to make it sound like that. We still want to have an eye toward quality. But I saw that as quality. I love the Super Friends. And those things were made so inexpensively back in the day. And the Hong Kong Phooey's and the Hanna-Barbera animation production style was all very low budget. Even the Flintstones and Jetsons that we still today know about and think of fondly were very inexpensive animated shows that were designed to be made inexpensively. And they were just about, you fell in love with the characters and the stories and the funny, Dino, the little dog that the Jetsons had. I still remember all those characters.
It's super fascinating. As we wrap up this, I want to make sure people one more time hear where they can find and connect with you and Pencilish, whether it's getting the book, listening to the podcast. Where are the best places for them to go?
Well, pencilish.com is going to be a pretty direct route, and you can hit the link there to go to the WeFunder, which is WeFunder/Pencilish, WeFunder.com/Pencilish. And then on Instagram, I'm at Tom Bancroft, the number 1. So Tom Bancroft 1, and same with Twitter. So I'm very much involved in Instagram. I kind of love it. I am on TikTok too, as Tom Bancroft, and I do more art tutorial kind of things on TikTok, especially. But Pencilish will be getting involved in TikTok and Instagram quite a bit too. We're very savvy to knowing this is you don't just put out a film on Netflix or whatever. Even those routes are even becoming old fashioned. Oh, I just got my film on Netflix, and so I'm going to sit back and let them sell it. And no, you got to have some presence for that film on Netflix and on Twitter. Or, I mean, on Instagram and on Twitter and on TikTok. Is there an element there that you can even involve that's really creative? And that's the new direction. Is that our content is going to be hosted on YouTube is the way I look at it, but we're going to have creative arms into these other areas too, where we're making content for that also that's customized.
One last question about Pencilish. First 3 series, are they going to be hand-drawn, computer animation? What's the hope for those?
Okay, I'm going to drop a new word for you. Get excited. Tradigital animation. So what that means is it's both computer and hand-drawn. You're drawing on a Cintiq. A Wacom Cintiq is the industry standard brand, but it is basically it's a monitor where you're drawing onto it like a tablet, but a more professional level of that. And so we are doing hand-drawn animation, but digitally using software like Toon Boom Harmony or even Animate. So yes, it's kind of both, but no, it's not the traditional computer animation like a Pixar film.
Cool. Super cool. We're going to take a break right here. And when we come back, it's rapid fire questions. Next time on JumbleThink, our guest will be Fergie Philippe, who currently stars on the hit Broadway show Hamilton. He also hosts a really cool podcast called It's Time to Meet the Muppets. Make sure to join us next time on JumbleThink. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions. We're back with Tom Bancroft to do rapid fire questions. Tom, are you ready?
I'm ready.
As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to work at a donut shop, probably own it. But I love donuts, so that seemed like the dream.
What is one book you think every dreamer should read?
I'm gonna say what was the Disney book, The War of Disney? It was all about the Michael Eisner era at Disney, and now I can't think of the title. But I want to say that one because it talks about not just dreams, but it talks about reality of the actual background. It can be a little dark, unfortunately, but I like that it's reality. I'm not into just dreaming. I'm all about doing and how do you actually work toward that goal. So I'm more into goals than dreams, I guess you could say, even though my life is a dream and I am always reaching for, I don't know. It's just the word I use.
A realistic dreamer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I'll put the link to the book in the episode notes so that you don't have to try to figure out what it is, but I'll find it and put it in there. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
I would like to think I would be a writer. I love to write. The few times I've written a couple books, but they're more art instruction. I like creative writing, and so I do write outlines. And I haven't gotten to the point where I'm writing scripts yet, but I really like the outline phase too. I'm coming up with the stories, and creative writing is something I love.
What's one thing you wish you would have known when you first started out?
How to draw better. That's an eternal reach. You're never can draw well enough. It just feels that way. It's a lifetime pursuit. I don't know if that's my answer, but this is supposed to be rapid fire. So yes.
If somebody has a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start, where should they start?
Thinking is like the number one thing that you need to do. And it's taken me years. It was probably 10 years into my career that every time I sat down with a blank piece of paper, I would just start sketching or I'd start writing. I'd just start. And it took me a long time to realize I got to just sit here and think for a minute.
Mm.
And oftentimes that thinking part doesn't happen at the desk. It happens well before that. And now I gestate on things. It's shower time. It's jog time. It's all those times where I'm just having a quiet moment. And by the way, I guess that's the answer. Take that quiet moment before you do anything.
Yeah. Lately, I've been saying there are a lot of people who want to be thought leaders who don't take time to think.
That's great. You're right. Genius.
Our last rapid fire question today is, what is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
I can check off so many bucket list things that I've done. It's almost hard. I know there's one. Draw a Marvel comic book cover. I'll say
That's
that.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. Tom, it's been an honor to have you on. We always like to leave our guests have the final thought. For all of us listening today, what do you want to leave us with?
I don't know. I've really enjoyed this time. I guess when I'm thinking about Pencilish, especially, is it took me so long. It took me 30 years to get this point of going, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And there's a big part of me that wishes I would have done it 10 or 20 years ago. And just know that, but I have to feel safe and go, no, this didn't exist then. I hadn't learned this. I hadn't learned that. And so I guess what I'm trying to say to everybody is that the time you're doing it is the right time. And that we need to stop fighting with that concept of, oh, I wish I missed out on this. I missed out on that. And that's a level of FOMO, right? Yeah. But in general, we got to be in the place we're at right now and go, no, this is the right time to be doing that thing. Not only because I just thought of it, but also because there have been things in our lives, and this is where faith comes back into this story for me. Yeah. I was led to learn this mistake and make this mistake and learn this thing and learn this thing to be able to make this the moment that I have this idea, because probably God gave it to me. Again, this is my viewpoint, but I really believe strongly that I wasn't meant to do it back then, even though there's a part of me that I just wish I would have been doing this Pencilish 20 years ago when I had a whole lot more energy, right? But I wasn't ready. Mm-hmm. This is the time.
Tom, it has been an honor to have you on. I'm a big fan of what you're doing. I'm excited to be an investor in Pencilish, and I'm rooting for you, not only because I'm invested, but because I actually think what you're doing is super cool. So thanks for taking time out and joining us here on JumbleThink.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Once again, I want to thank Tom for joining us here on JumbleThink. Funding for Pencilish closes later this week, so make sure to go check out those links. And if you're interested in investing, get your investment in. I also want to thank you for tuning into today's show. It means the world to me that you would listen, and we're so excited to be back in releasing new episodes of JumbleThink. It's going to be a lot of fun in the weeks to come, so make sure to check out every episode. Now it is your turn. We believe you were created for something awesome, so get out there, dream big, and change the world around you.
Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps. Vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.